Oh, you all. Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Alex, very much for the warm introduction and for agreeing to serve as our MC for the evening. It's interesting, and I'll just go off script for a second. My Apple Watch told me that my heart rate was up, and it seemed like I wasn't doing any exercise. So, my name is Tonia Wellons, and I am delighted to be the president and CEO of the Greater Washington Community Foundation. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 2022 Celebration of Philanthropy. Yay. Can you believe that this is the first time we've come together for this celebration of philanthropy in 3 years? I am so excited to be back in the same room with you and to connect with our region's changemakers for our annual celebration of local philanthropy and its impact on our region. I want to start by thanking our community champions, especially the David and Michael Blair Family Foundation and the Cliff and Deborah White Family Foundations. We are very fortunate to have the support and care of so many individuals and families and businesses and civic groups who support our work across the region. Tonight, our gala is a little bit different from past years because we wanted to create the opportunity to share our new strategic vision and to jumpstart the learning process together and in a venue where you could actually hear us. So, while we are fewer in numbers and in a much larger space for safety, we wanted to quiet the noise and reconnect with you on purpose. As I think back on all that has happened over the last few years, it almost feels unreal. Together we endured a global health pandemic that has taken the lives of millions. We witnessed both economic and political crises and participated in a renewed struggle for racial justice. Over the last 2 years, we came together as a community, our neighbors helping neighbors. We stabilized hundreds of our region's critical nonprofits, providing emergency food and shelter, medical care, virtual learning support, cash assistance, and more. Ultimately, we dispersed $80 million in relief and recovery grants that supported hundreds of thousands of individuals and families and small businesses in our region. And I want to thank you for your support and dedicated commitment. Together, we've supported our entire region as it continues to navigate through these challenging times on the road to recovery. One of the hard lessons that we learned from our crisis response work was how the dual health and economic crisis particularly harmed communities of color in our region. This was due in large part to what we call pre-existing inequities related to housing and healthcare, education, employment and wages, wealth, and racism. Based on a community survey we conducted in the weeks preceding the pandemic, we knew that Black residents in Greater Washington region were more than twice as likely to say that economic conditions were getting worse. They found it difficult to manage financially and were worried about paying their rent or mortgage. And it paints a grim picture, but it's accurate, an accurate picture of the status quo to which we can't return. We have both a moral obligation and an unprecedented opportunity to build a more equitable and just society, rather than recovering a flawed one. So now is the time to reshape how and where resources flow in our communities so that we can build more equitable systems leading to a more resilient and prosperous region. And it's within this context that the Community Foundation embarked on a year-long strategic planning process to develop a bold new vision, a 10-year vision to pursue economic justice in the Greater Washington region. The planning process was led by our trustees, our amazing trustees, Sean Morris and Artist Hampshire Cowan were our chairs for our strategic planning committee. It was supported by our entire board, our staff, a consulting team with deep engagement from our local advisory boards, our fund holders, and our community leaders. We worked together for many months to chart a path forward for our collective future. Now, you just heard me say the Community Foundation sits at the intersection of racialized wealth on the one hand and poverty on the other. And so it's from this vantage point that we recognize that our region has seemingly intractable problems or challenges, but they stem from generations of racial and economic apartheid. And I don't use those words lightly, having lived and worked in South Africa in the immediate post-apartheid era, knowing the conditions of Black people and people of color then and now. The divide manifests itself as segregated housing and neighborhoods, disparities in life expectancy, low wages, unemployment, and high incarceration rates. It presents as over-policing, under-resourced schools, and disinvested neighborhoods. But let's be clear, the systems that should help create opportunities for Black, Latinx, and people of color are instead fundamentally designed to produce racial and economic disparities. In other words, the problem is not with the people, but rather it is with systems and structures that operate with both implicit and explicit biases, ones that are often reinforced by legislation and policy and practices. And so all of this points to an overarching fact, one that persists and is uncomfortable to sit with sometimes, but race matters. And so, the first pillar of our strategic framework is to lead with racial equity. For us, it means examining our institutional culture and practices and policies so that we practice what we preach. It also means centering the experiences of people most affected. For our region, it's Black people, Latinx, Indigenous, and other people of color. And our new framework is both people-centric and place-based. The second pillar of our framework is to align our business with our vision. During the course of the strategic planning process, it was affirmed that our foundation falls in the category of medium-sized community foundations, and that we are actually one of the least endowed community foundations of our size in the entire country. So the downside of being largely non-endowed is twofold. One, we have limited control over our assets as a community institution. And then two, and that creates a bit of fragility. But two, we have limited discretion on where the resources go, even as much as our fund holders, and we absolutely adore our fund holders, typically align with our strategic vision. And so one of our ambitions is to double the assets of the Community Foundation over the next 10 years. This ambition is rooted in being able to stabilize this anchor institution, and that we're able to more flexibly respond to the size and the scale of the challenges and opportunities in front of us, and fund this vision that we're putting forth this evening. Part of our strategy for endowment building is to invite our nonprofit partners, many of whom were struggling in the early months of the pandemic, to establish endowed funds with us that will be managed by our asset managers so that they grow as we grow. We plan to extend this product to nonprofits and faith-based institutions and to community-serving organizations like fraternities and sororities so that we are all better prepared to serve this community and its citizens boldly. Now and into the future. Thank you. The expectation is that we will all be ready for the next crisis, and it will come. And there should be a reliable stream of revenue for our nonprofits to access so that so that there is a vehicle for those who love this community to support it in perpetuity. As we grow as a foundation, we are excited to welcome new funds and like-minded partners to our community of givers, creating tangible and lasting change in this region. Recently, we welcomed the historic $95 million Health Equity Fund to our philanthropic family. Yay. The purpose of this transformative fund is to improve health outcomes and health equity of DC residents. And we are working closely with the newly created 7-member Health Equity Committee that was recently appointed by the Office of the Mayor and Care First to develop its community investment strategy and funding priorities. Aligning our business with our values also means that these very assets that are under our management also reflect our philanthropic goals. We recently updated our investment policy statement to reflect our commitment to racial equity, to do no harm, and we are committed to a more diverse pool of women and people of color investment managers. Pillar 3 of our 10-year framework is our North Star. It reflects our ambition to increase economic mobility and close our region's racial wealth gap. We believe this to be the most catalytic opportunity of our lifetime. At the Community Foundation, we envision a region where people of all races and places and identities reach their full potential. By almost every measure, education, income, housing, health, and wealth, our community's Black and Latinx neighbors are lagging behind our white neighbors. Again, this is not the result of individual failure, but rather systemic design. And our region isn't unique in facing this challenge. But what sets us apart are the stark inequities which have led some of the nation's wealthiest zip codes being just a short drive from some of its poorest. And as the home to the nation's capital region and all the prestige and influence and wealth and power it provides, we can and must do better. We believe that by changing the prospects for how our Black and brown neighbors generate, sustain, and share wealth, we will ultimately improve the quality of life for everyone who lives here, everyone who works here, everyone who raises a family in this region. We were party. You can clap there. We were party to an experience of our community coming together during the most traumatic public health crisis of our lifetime. We bore witness to emergent strategies that were put in place when our backs were against the wall, and this community needed us the most. And we believe we have a unique opportunity to reverse the damage caused by the pandemic and centuries of systemic inequities in our community. So when people ask me, well, what would it take to close the racial wealth gap in our region? My response is this: our community needs a vision. It needs strong leadership and a coalition of the willing who will invest the time in understanding what got us here in the first place and what it will take to get us out. This coalition understands the compounding impact of the racial wealth gap, the threat that wealth and income inequality pose to our economy, to our democracy, to community safety, and our humanity. This coalition recognizes that quick fixes and simple solutions will only get us but so far. And they are willing to do the essential work to mobilize resources and build critical partnerships with community and across public and private sectors to shore up basic needs and invest in strategies that increase mobility, like good jobs, like home ownership and entrepreneurship, just to name a few. And this coalition is willing to focus clearly on an agenda that moves us upstream to individual and community wealth building and policy solutions that help us achieve our goals. This means turning our attention to strategies and investment policies that allow us to leapfrog incremental change or incremental progress and close the gap. Using data compiled by the Brookings Institution and the Metropolitan Washington Council on Government, we have identified places in our region where Black and brown people are experiencing the deepest disparities in home ownership and income as proxies for wealth. And as we begin the work to closing the gap, these places will serve as the primary areas where we will focus our grant making and our broader community leadership capacity over the next decade. Our new framework requires that we approach our work in this way, fiercely focused on the people and places in our region that are struggling the most. And we will partner with community-based organizations, especially those led by people of color, with deep roots serving these communities. And so while our initial analysis has us prioritizing neighborhoods east of the river in DC, Langley Park and White Oak in Germantown in Montgomery County, we're looking at Chillum and Seat Pleasant and Suitland in Prince George's County, and it has us more thoughtfully examining the Route 1 corridor in Northern Virginia, just to name a few examples. But this level of specificity is necessary to help us understand the needs and nuances of these communities and to know whether we're making a real measurable difference. Our vision for closing the racial wealth gap requires that we expand our imaginations and act boldly and direct our investment capital towards solutions that put more resources in the hands of people who need them the most. And so while our practice has largely been to invest in basic needs, or what we refer to as downstream strategies, our ambition is to deliberately move upstream, investing in strategies that demonstrate catalytic opportunities for scale, such as child savings accounts. Our aspiration is to launch 2 pilots, one in Montgomery County and one in Prince George's County. Yay. We're supporting guaranteed income pilots. We know that providing cash transfers are one of the best tools to help low-income earners achieve self-sufficiency, and we are proud to have invested in most of the pilots around the region and expect to invest in more. And recently, we invested in the Prince George's County Community College's Truth, Racial Healing, and Transformation Campus Center, which is designed to prepare the next generation of leaders to break down systemic racism and dismantle the belief in a hierarchy of human value. We look forward to sharing with you more details as we launch more pilots and other critical investments in these neighborhoods. So next year, we will come together to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the Community Foundation. For almost 50 years, we have blazed a trail in philanthropy and partnership and community impact. And I am so excited about what the next 50 years might mean for this foundation and the community we serve. To help us celebrate our past and secure our future, later this year we will move into the leadership phase of a campaign to fund our vision for this community and our foundation. And as we embark on this exciting journey, I really want to invite you all to see yourselves in our framework for the future of this region. So what are some of the ways you can start to get involved right now? Well, I'm glad you asked. Become an investor in the Community Foundation. We invite you to make a gift and connect to our work so that we can lean in together on a shared vision for a more just economy. We invite you to align your philanthropy with our vision of closing the racial wealth gap so that our collective impact is experienced exponentially. And we invite you to become a member of the Coalition of the Willing by deepening your understanding of the racial wealth gap and what it will take to close it. The upcoming fireside chat, which I'm really excited about, will be the first conversation in a new learning series that we're developing on this topic. It will also be recorded and made available as the first episode in a new podcast series we're launching later this year. And if you haven't joined our quarterly book club, and I know Ronnie will be excited that I mention it, what are you waiting for? We extend the invitation to you to join us for this quarterly gathering, which is another way for us to grow together as a community. And in the same way that the Community Foundation is prioritizing its responsibility to increase strategic economic participation in our asset management and grant making, we want to encourage you to do the same. By widening the pool of economic development opportunities to a more diverse set of participants, we begin to make steps together to close the gap. So I invite you to take a look at your company's requirements for entry-level roles. Take a look at your vendors and partners. Who are your contractors or your coworkers? And what's your talent pipeline looking like? Does it reflect the diversity of this region? And if it doesn't, those are the immediate steps you can take to help us achieve a more just economy in our region. My hope is that tonight will serve not just as a reminder of what our region has achieved already, but also as an exciting preamble to the unlimited potential that we can unlock together. As I look out here tonight, and I wish I could see your faces, I know that so many of our partners and friends in the work are here, and it has been my absolute pleasure to work with you. I'll close by saying thank you to all of you for your continued support. I want to offer a huge debt of congratulations and thanks to the amazing staff at the Greater Washington Community Foundation. To our Board of Trustees, and in the absence of my chair, Catherine Weymouth. To all of our advisory board members and fund holders and the staff here at the Warner Theater, and to all of you, thank you. I am confident that together we will continue to build more equitable, just, and thriving communities where everyone in our region prospers. Thank you all.